So I'd like to call to order the Ramsey-Washington Metro Watershed District October board meeting. As we jump into it, first I'd like to suggest if you have something that you'd like to see removed from the consent agenda, now would be the time to propose removal of any of the items. If not, may I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved. Second.
Thank you. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, say nay. Okay. Moving forward to the consent agenda, everything will be approved once the motion is passed. We can continue with discussions after as well. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved. Seconded.
Okay. I'm just double checking this, Tina. I can say all in favor, say aye, and then have discussion, correct?
No, discussion be first.
Perfect. That's why I wanted to double check. I had just two quick questions on the budget, specifically looking at the Target Woodbury stormwater retrofit. I'm just trying to connect the contract price of the $53,700 compared to what I see in the total bid layout that sums to $550,000. I think it's page 26 in the packet.
Okay. Oh, yep. Yeah, that is because you have not approved change order 2 yet.
Oh,
That's a good,
understood.
that's a very good catch, but it was intentional because we wanted to not show the new current price until change order 2 had been officially approved by the managers.
I didn't catch that part.
Well,
Thank you.
I mean,
Okay.
that's an understandable question. Yeah.
Okay, I don't have any further questions. Anyone else have a point for discussion or question? That doesn't change your vote. Okay, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Consent agenda passes. Moving forward to visitor comments. Any comments that you would like to make, or just like to continue?
No, I'm just here to see what you guys are all about.
That's perfect. Wonderful.
We do have a couple people online
Oh, yes,
too,
please.
Sophie and Matt. Do either of you have any comments you'd like to make before the board, or are you here for a permit or a stewardship grant program?
This is Matt Schwartz. I'm here for the Shoreview Villas permit review. No comments at this time.
Okay.
I'm just here to observe. So thank you.
Thanks, Sophie.
Wonderful. Transitioning to permit programs. Cool, after you.
Yeah. So permit application 24-27 is a similar project to what was passed on the consent agenda in terms of it's a water pipeline project. We also saw one last month. And so this particular segment required a variance request for disturbance in the wetland buffer. There's 2 locations near Woodbury City Hall where there are proposed impacts to that buffer. I should mention in the existing conditions, our buffer requirements are not met. There's an existing paved walking trail and Valley Creek Road. So I'm taking any questions.
I'll open up for questions, just looking at my own notes. I just had a question on the feasibility study that I believe is called out in the 3rd paragraph, or in the 2nd paragraph, maybe.
Yeah.
Is there a way that we get to understand that? Like, it's in feasibility stage. Do we learn with them on the feasibility? Do we get access to the feasibility study data?
That was a process undertaken a couple of years ago
Oh,
when planning
understood.
this project.
Okay.
If it were something like wetland impacts, like if that required a replacement plan through WACA, that's something that we would have dove into certainly and had more information about alternatives. But This is a variance for just the wetland buffer, so no wetland impacts are proposed. And it sounds like it was part of a larger planning process with the 3M settlement related to PFAS, so. I don't know much else about that.
No, that's, yeah, I was more of a curiosity. Okay, any further discussion or questions from this permit 2447? Do I have a motion to approve permit application 2447?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Further discussion? All in favor, say aye. All opposed, say nay. Application 2447 is approved. Moving forward to permit 2448.
Yes, thank you. This is a sort of an initial phase of a redevelopment on Snail Lake off Highway 96. It's a shuttered ministry campus. So there's existing buildings and paths and stairs that need to be removed. And the proposal is to redevelop the area for single family homes. You'll notice that this permit request is for the homes in the interior portion of the development. And we'll be needing to review the lake adjacent homes for grading and impervious surface calculations to ensure that the filtration basin that they designed that will go in as part of this phase is adequately sized. They have said they planned for that, but we'll need to check that once the homes on the lake are finalized. So I would anticipate at least one additional permit. I don't know if it's all going to be separate. I'm not clear on how many builders are going to be involved, but we'll need to look at each lot because it is a common plan of development. This was not included on consent agenda because of a variance request for removals of the existing stairs and outbuildings next to the lake. There is a wetland fringe along the lake that was identified and is jurisdictional. So we would require that buffer be maintained. So the variance request, they are proposing to install stairs in lieu of what's already there, wooden stairs and a mulch access trail. Would reduce impervious area in the buffer over existing conditions. And then the other wetland is proposed for a wetland a buffer variance for install of a flared end that would connect the filtration basin towards the east and it would outlet eventually to that wetland.
I had a really hard time finding the outfall pipe.
Yeah.
Because it's in the buffer, is that right?
Yeah, so it's an outlet B, way kind of northwest. So oh, it looks like it's cut off from sheet C402A. Oh, sorry, C301 in the board packet shows that pipe. It's kind of hard to see. There's silk fence in the pipe and it shows the buffers in outlet B.
It's on page 57 of the
Yes, thank you.
PDF.
The wetland that outlets to is not adjacent to the lake. It's up
Right.
near 96.
That's what I was curious, but I couldn't
Yeah.
find it. Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I tried to include a few different plan sheets. There's quite a big development and then they have zoomed in views, which I appreciate.
Okay, and so the lake homes, the pads along that frontage, they'll come through as a separate permit.
Yeah, at least if they're not all together in one, I don't know how many separate permits there will be, but we would certainly need to review the grading plans to make sure there's no alteration to floodplain or to the wetland buffer on those parcels. And then also to verify that the impervious area is what they had assumed when they built the water system. So what will be included with this permit request is the interior homes, excuse me, block 2 on the plans, that stormwater basin, the stairs, potentially the dock, and then the outfall to I can't remember if it's wetland 2 or wetland 1 on the northwest.
So is block 3 in that as well?
Oh, yeah, block 3, couldn't find the label, yes.
How common are outfall pipes in no disturb buffers?
They're very common, just to be able to get the water out of the basin, because it is a filtration basin, so it will outlet via drain tile after it's been like treated in the sand layer.
Okay.
So, and then it'll get picked up via storm sewer to that wetland. So the water would be pre-treated.
Question about the discharge in outlot B before it goes into the pond, I believe. And it looks like, I don't remember what here, I'm just trying to find that, but it shows a little kind of pile of riprap, and there's mention of use of riprap. I'm wondering if elevations might not be flat enough, if there might be alternatives to using riprap in a nearly upland area like that. It's in the buffer, not within the wetland itself. Single family homes, there might be kids, whatever, and it just riprap doesn't tend to vegetate well. Since this is a buffer, I don't know if there was any discussion about alternatives.
It does extend to the normal water level though, of that wetland, is that correct?
I'm not sure, but
I mean, typically, we would require that the
Yeah, we would-
house all be at the normal water of the wetland, and then we need the energy dissipation, so we would. And we don't, I guess, dictate how a designer might design that energy dissipation.
Yeah, but there are alternatives for.
Right, but we don't specify what they have or have to use for that sort of. We
Right.
require there to be energy dissipation,
Right.
but they can decide how they.
So it's not something we can necessarily comment on.
I don't think we could require, but we can give comments.
Yeah, I can ask if it was the velocity that they were expecting out of that pipe that ultimately triggered. I'd have to ask the civil engineer about the specifications for the riprap. And I mean, generally we like to see riprap because if it's not specified, it's really hard to get that added if there are erosion problems. But I take what you're saying because it would be a small area that's not.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, so I can inquire about that.
Yeah, this is Matt Schwartz. I am from Kimney Horn, and I've worked with Adam Jaden on this project. So it sounds like you guys are talking about the riprap
Yeah.
going into the filtration basin.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a pretty typical design that we do, just to slow down the water that goes into the pond and to reduce the erosion around that outlet pipe. If we don't put any sort of energy dissipation tools at the outlet, that we will get erosion underneath that flare dense section that discharges into the basin. However, I can't speak to I cannot speak to alternative methods of energy dissipation being looked at for this project. We hadn't received that comment to this point, so we just went with something that we know works in this use case.
Yeah, what I could think of is like a turf reinforcement mat, but those don't always
Yeah, I mean,
work great.
that's one alternative
Yeah.
with even a little rise, to kind of catch some of that water.
Yeah.
Detain it with a turf reinforcement mat. I acknowledge riprap is industry standard,
Yeah.
people know it, and I'm just thinking that in this instance, I wonder if there was any room for alternatives, if there had been any thought, or something that was discussed. So that's, in this particular application, since it is actually more in the upland and like I say, kids will potentially be running around in that area and, you know, trips, falls, what have you.
Mhm.
There are alternatives. That's all I'm thinking.
Yeah, it's a good comment. Generally, if we're inspecting, we don't see riprap, we'd ask the
ask.
contractor, where is it? And then if they say it's not specified, we're just like, okay, well, we'll have to see how it works, and if it doesn't require that. But yeah, I could, have that discussion further with, Kimberly Horn about that. I'm just not sure of the velocities that were expected out of there. But yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have a question. From the overview, photos, it looks like it's in a lovely site, right on the lake shore. And I understand that this permit discussion doesn't affect or doesn't pertain to the lakeshore homes. But just kind of a question in advance. Do we have any opportunity to work with a developer to perhaps promote kind of lakeshore healthy landscaping? Because it's we know that there's a long-term benefit and it's fairly expensive to go in afterwards.
Yeah. Well,
Just a question.
yeah, they would be required to maintain that buffer because of the wetland fringe along Snail. So it would be that no disturb 75-foot buffer. So yeah, we would look at that certainly when those plans come in for the lake adjacent homes. But yeah, I agree. It's probably, I know it's like sort of a bluff right now, kind of a steep drop off. So it's depending on if we see any regrading of those lots, we could pitch that our shoreline restoration grant opportunities. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Any further questions or comments? Thank you, Stephanie and Mark. Okay. Can I have a motion to approve permit 2448?
So moved. Second.
Wonderful. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. You respond.
Oh, aye.
Oh, sorry. Just want to double check if I should do the abstain. Okay, permit 2448 has passed. Moving forward to, I don't recognize Katie.
It's Katie Turpin-Nagel from Bar.
Oh, thank
She's
you.
just
Just
tuning in
Katie.
too,
I was
yeah.
like, okay.
Yeah. Not
Just
just
Katie.
Katie. but it's Katie from Bar.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Going to the enforcement report. Okay.
Yeah, a number of meetings and activities, couple of permit closures, and we focused the updates, or Kindred Mary did, on the newly beginning sites in the fall here. We do see a lot of sites that are still starting. This is common every year, but probably especially this year because it still feels like summer. So we focused on the 3 that started this month, including a townhome project in North St. Paul, MnDOT testing lab in Maplewood, and expansion of Ramsey County Parks, Keller Park Tulu course.
You had quite a public showing for the Tublo Parks. Did I say that right?
Tulu.
Thank you, Tulu. Sorry.
Yeah, I mean, Ben probably knows better, but I think they're very heavily used.
Yes, we are expecting these to be extremely popular. We're lighting a park area for the first time in Ramsey County history, so it should be exciting.
Yeah, and then Kendra added some information about some natural resource restoration work that has occurred in and around that area. So just for reference. And then we have an update, kind of a case study on things that we see when we're doing underground inspections for closed permits, so older systems that have been installed. So we go out with Bar Engineering, to do closeout inspections on new systems, but we also complete maintenance inspections on old systems. So these kinds of findings and meetings and eventual repairs are fairly common. It's an added challenge when the best management practices are underground. Developers, property managers change, and so just kind of highlights the need for us to stay on this and hopefully in the future have more time and resources to expand those inspections. We do those for private properties as well as city and county owned facilities as well.
Yeah, in regard to that follow-up inspection, I believe it was permit 1623 at Chick-fil-A. I just really wanted to recognize and compliment that being done. I think that it's really important kind of work. It's not something, it's probably something to probably get pushed back, but I just really want to recognize it. And to the extent that can be continued and maybe expanded upon, I certainly applaud that. I do have just a slight question of sorts. If you know, I found it somewhat interesting that the access was paved over, and it's like, well, yeah, I understand there can be changes in ownership and management and whatever, you know, contractor doing maintenance and lawn work and whatever, but do we know what timing? Did this happen like soon after the, you know, the primary construction, or was it something that just sort of?
Yeah,
I find it odd.
sadly, this is more common than you would think.
Oh, okay.
Even on new sites that we haven't even signed off on yet. If sometimes we find that manholes are just completely paved over. So not a great site communication happening. But yeah, it's surprising.
Yeah,
for sure.
Is there, what role for these types of things does signage provide to help educate, or is it just these
Yeah,
touch points?
not generally for, you mean like for public education?
Yeah, I was just trying to think through, like, is there a way to make it more evident that it's a BMP? Forgive me, when we say signage, I'm thinking, I get you, but is there a way to label it in a more obvious manner
For the owner to.
for the owner?
Oh.
And
you know?
make it.
Like
Exactly.
you see underground cable, or, you know,
Yeah.
it's a little sign. that
That's
say-
what I was thinking in my head.
Yeah, manual access needed for maintenance. It doesn't have to be anything elaborate or, yeah, I don't know if that's would be standard, but if it's common that you're running into these things. maybe-
Yeah. Well, for manholes, yeah, they're generally just labeled like
Yeah.
sanitary or storm.
Sure.
Yeah.
And they're areas that get heavy traffic and plowing and stuff, so you'd have to be cognizant of that. I don't know of any other. I mean, we've enhanced our requirements for operations and maintenance plans so that they have to be site-specific, very clearly labeled and handed to the owner at the time of closeout. So we've been trying to improve awareness of these facilities that way. And just remind them, like, you signed this agreement, you have to inspect this. Here's everything, you know, we require the engineers to compile O&M plans so that anyone could pick it up and understand at least who to call to do it, to back it up for them, but to know that it's there and what's required. But yeah, unfortunately, we can't, the number of underground and above ground, we can't get there annually, so I'm not sure like when this, you know, paving over would have happened. It certainly indicates they weren't inspecting it annually. But thankfully, was still able to capture water because those weren't blocked or anything, the catch basins.
Is that a condition that is usually included in their operation and maintenance plans?
Inspection?
Yeah,
Yes.
annual inspection.
Yes.
So that's something you can point to.
Mm-hmm. Yep, it's in the agreement that they sign, and the agreement goes with the land, so changing of
Sure.
owners, but it just might be an educational need to continue these on-site meetings and things like that. But yeah, certainly with the addition of a third permit staff person this year, I know it's a big desire of Mary's to really expand this maintenance inspection work as much as possible.
So between the number of staff members that you have and the increasing number of keys that are installed, how frequently do you get to go back?
That's a good question. All of the underground systems that I know of have been inspected, but there's, hundreds, I believe now. And we really started inspecting underground systems about 10 years ago. So the older ones have probably gotten inspected 2 or 3 times.
Every three to 5 years.
Yeah, it kind of depends on, they prioritize their time with bar for closeouts because people are waiting on their escrow monies, and we need to make sure we can close out permits and pass that maintenance on to the property owner from the contractor. So those are certainly priority. But yeah, we just try to sprinkle them in. We look at where the closeout inspections are, and we have it all mapped in GIS spatially, so we can, look at when was the last time this was inspected and kind of select older Yankees that way.
It's a very interesting case study. I appreciate including.
One more quick question. I'm guessing that in the, I'll call it, approval packet permit, that annual inspection, there's no reporting obligation.
There is.
There is. So would that be a flag if we're not seeing any reporting?
We
Oh,
rarely
maybe
do.
not.
Yeah, it's just a matter of trying to get after thousands of properties at this point.
Right, but I mean, I'm wondering if that might,
But
if that might be another approach that,
Yeah.
oh, we're not seeing these reports. We've got to push out some kind of communication to,
Yeah.
the 379 of these that probably should be sending something in. And
Yeah.
then we're gonna get around to inspecting them, over the next 3 to 5 years, but at least put them on notice.
Yep, Mary's actually doing that this
Good.
year. We've seen some trickle in. She's starting with newly closed out sites to just keep it fresh and prioritize those first, and then we'll work back. But yeah, we've had some trickle in. Some is better than none, but yeah, it's definitely
And there's
on
a
our
little-
minds.
It's a little bit of an administrative task to then keep track of those things
Right.
that nobody ever wants to do.
Mhm.
But
Mary's really, taking that by.
Yeah, she's
Good.
very, which is great because, we, triage and prioritize the active sites, the new BMPs, and it's been an eternal struggle, I would say, with the permit program over time, is that the older best management practices aren't inspected as much as we would like. So yeah, little success stories like this is great, but yeah, we recognize the need to be doing this more as our time allows.
What's the, there's no, you can't levy a fine if someone's not in compliance, you just show them their agreement, is there any
So we can,
process if someone's not doing it? Cause I mean,
Yeah.
it's not just underground, it's any BMP has this maintenance agreement.
so we can go, the agreement specifies that we can actually go in and perform the charge it back to
Okay,
them. But again, that's a lot of time and
Yeah.
effort on our end, and I would say it would, we do have that ability to do that, but yeah, it's more of a time resource thing. We really want them to be doing it
Yeah.
themselves. But yeah, if it was really bad, or if it was causing an offsite issue or something like that, we could do
If I could jump in a little bit on the agreements and
Lauren did them so many times.
yes, yeah. I mean, that's my job, right? Is to have these agreements. One suggestion that the board could consider, and it's something I've talked to Nicole about in the past, but right now these maintenance agreements aren't recorded against the property, so they're not in the property records formally. So yes, they are designed to run with the land, but there isn't anything, if the real estate changed hands and it was against the title, the deed itself, it would be pulled up in the title exam showing, everything on the exchange of the property and saying, oh, by the way, you're on notice that you have these inspection and maintenance requirements. So I don't know with this particular, I mean, I'm sure it happens even with land that's owned by the same person or business forever and they don't remember, but that would be a step to consider to make sure that future owners are on actual notice of the requirements and they don't have to depend on the seller handing them that packet of information.
So most do record against the, like, they do get recorded with.
Oh, they
Ramsey-Washington
do?
County, yeah.
Okay. And
We've
does
had to
the applicant
revise-
do it?
Yes, yeah.
Okay, and it's part of the closeout process?
We
That they
have the
do the recorded
agreements,
one?
proof of recording, no, but
I think that would be, I I don't often like to compare the watershed districts I represent because they're very different, but I see we're heavily involved in the closeout process for Valley Branch permits. We require proof of recording before closing out a permit, and it's often, if not the last thing, we kind of have to pull teeth to get people to do that. So it's a thought.
What would be an associated motion, Tina? Or is it just, could you evaluate the work?
If there's any motion.
I'm just curious, just look into it.
We'll look into that process and see what changes we need to make for them.
yeah, we have the signed notarized agreements and they're directed to record it, but yeah, we could.
I think it would be worth ensuring. I mean, there's a cost associated with it. It's usually like $50 that there's a recording fee, and it's really just making sure they know how to do it and take the extra, 30 minutes to get it done. So it shouldn't be a big barrier, but from what I've seen on closeouts in Valley Branch, it's like the last thing on the list and easy to not do.
Well, often by then the property sometimes already has changed hands.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah, I'd have to think that through, but I mean, I get enough questions about the process and how to do it, so I'm confident that it's being done, but yeah, I could add it to checklist of sorts. I know we
Yeah.
have a closeout checklist.
Where you at it, if you don't mind just looking into it, and maybe we can add it as a discussion topic for a later time.
Or even Nicole, I mean, I know we've talked about this before. I'm sorry, I didn't realize it was part of the applicant's requirement to do it. But we could look at it to get, I'm happy to just meet with Nicole or whatever is best. It's not guaranteeing that now all of a sudden inspections are gonna start and maintenance is gonna be kept
Actually,
up, but it's a,
the discussion would come out is, if Valley Branch is seeing a better
Yeah.
set of maintenance, then it's worth the discussion of how do you add another step in the process. If they're seeing similar types of situations, then I don't know if it's really worth the time, if I'm being honest, or at least in my opinion.
I was gonna say, I mean, if we're gonna examine this, I think we should also examine, as you noted, Ben, the remedy. If the remedy is, please tell us something, but you don't, and then 3 to 5 years later, we get back. And the best that we can do is we do the work and bill the property owner. I still don't think that's a very good remedy, because I've had liens put against property because I just won't pay them because I dispute them, and then I'll take the person to court. And so if we're going to have just the remedy be doing maintenance, I'm not sure that's a very powerful remedy.
It's a really interesting option. It'd be wonderful to look into both of those aspects, truthfully, if it's worth doing this. And
I don't know that we've ever gotten to that point where we came in and.
Not after a closeout.
Yeah. But yeah, I think the on-site meetings and the continued inspection and, calling and emailing, I think having these like on-site meetings, the owner wasn't aware of what he was needing to do. This project was 8 years ago. I'm sure there's been multiple property managers at that particular restaurant. So I think we see our time best spent in the education.
And going upstream makes a lot of
Yeah.
sense, but it'd just be nice to understand.
Yeah.
It would also be interesting to find out what, like Lauren was saying, what Valley Branch does, but what other watershed districts are doing. So
I would say that we are far ahead of in BMP maintenance inspections. Most other, I mean, we meet with all the metro watershed districts, the regulatory teams do together, sometimes quarterly, seasonally. We all have the same struggles. I would say that particularly our underground inspection program is far ahead of any other watershed that I've heard of.
It sounds like Ashley has a really good process in terms of let's hit the near-term folks who have gone through it with the communication. It seems like if you have enough time at hand, it gives you a chance to look at the process, understand how the emails are working, and then we can talk about the remedy as it comes through. It'd just be nice to see that picture. Yeah,
There's, I've been thinking about this. I'm wondering if if this is a rich enough topic that we might not want to revisit it at some point. Put it on the action log and, kind of keep it.
And what do you mean by this topic? Like what in particular would you want to discuss?
I would not restrict it to the underground inspections.
No, right, that maintenance agreements are for all BMPs.
yeah.
Right, so kind of how best to implement the BMP inspection post-project, so the follow-up. And what avenues might there be for remedies? It's probably the kind of thing that staff and Tina, you guys would work out. I'm just wanting not to lose track of this if it's something that be worth coming back for further discussion that's kind of scheduled time.
It's, yeah, I mean, it's certainly been a discussion topic in the permit team forever. It's just a matter of, staff time to be able to inspect, but yeah, I know Mary's really excited about expanding this closed permit, education outreach and inspection. So yeah, we could.
I think what I would suggest is that when Nicole comes in January, usually you do your permit.
I don't know that we do it. Oh, the memo,
Summary.
The summary.
not the presentation.
Yeah, oh,
I don't do a presentation, but I do a memo. Yeah,
but maybe during that discussion,
Sure.
we can add some discussion. Like, we can share so that you fully understand our process program.
Mhm.
I
and
actually
know
like that timing because we'll see how well, and forgive me, I said Ashley earlier, but I mean Mary's
yeah.
communication strategy
Yeah.
works.
Yeah.
That gives enough time to see.
Yeah, she could, if she's available to attend, could explain what her hopes and dreams are for these efforts, and what she's seen so far this year implementing some new strategies. So.
And we can share what some of the other watersheds have in their maintenance agreements too, so that.
That would be great. Nicole, you'll keep track of adding it to the memo then? Do we need it as
Yeah.
part of the action?
For that January memo, yeah.
This is a great conversation. Thank you, everybody. Any further questions on the enforcement action report? So let's transition to the stewardship grant program.
Actually.
Here we go.
Good evening. So let's see, page 64, we have the budget status update. We had, I think, 5 projects from last month get approved between staff.
Feedback from you, it's like,
Sounds like there's two of you.
Yeah.
Oh no.
I don't know if you have. Speaker.
I can jump into Ashley.
How does this sound? Is that
Same.
any better? Okay.
It's got a little echo.
I could, as she tries to look at it, are there questions for budget status update? Just to get them queued up, is she?
I will say, so yeah, I think as you're saying, yeah, there's been some staff approvals. You had the 3 on the consent agenda, and then I know we have a couple potentially big ones coming in next month. The city of St. Paul will be requesting pretty much the remaining street sweeping funds for their fall efforts, which we're excited about. And then, yeah, maybe another, hopefully 1 or 2.
It surprised me that there was a small enough amount for street sweeping for staff approval. What was that? Just out of curiosity.
That was, oh no, actually I'm blanking. It was City of Roseville.
It was enhanced data collection.
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
And your sound is much better now, so.
Okay. I don't know. The computer must have done an update. It was like asking, what kind of setting are you in? And I was like, I don't, on my computer. Yeah, so that they're doing additional data collection on their enhanced street sweeping program to ensure that they're still targeting the right areas. And so happy to
Wonderful.
support that and make sure that we're spending dollars where it makes sense.
Are
So.
they willing to share that information as well?
Yeah,
Okay,
absolutely.
good. That's what I was double checking.
Yep. Yeah, if there's no questions, that's all I've got. We do have, like Paige mentioned, a couple of big ones coming up. So we'll be that bottom dollar will be getting lower and lower.
That is a good thing. Wonderful. Any further questions for the budget status update? Moving forward to action items, we have 2 watershed excellence award approvals. I'll pass it to you, team.
Yeah, so you'll see the item in the packet, and then I emailed out the award. Everybody had a chance to take a look at those. These awards, so there was, say how many there were, maybe 11 nominations, if I remember right, total that first staff looked at. Oh yeah, it does say 11 nominations were received by staff. The staff group narrowed it down to 7 finalists that were brought to the CAC for selection and approval, and they're asking for now the board to approve their suggestions. This will be for our Watershed Excellence Awards dinner that'll be held on Thursday, November 21st at Philadelphia.
For those who have participated in CAC or maybe sit and represent, I mean, was anybody present in the discussion of these particular nominees? Looks very well qualified, honestly, just reading them through. So.
Yeah, my understanding of the discussion was that they had a robust discussion, but that it was, I mean, everybody that was nominated is very qualified.
Yeah.
And deserves award for the work that they've done, but that they felt exceptionally about it.
Having listened in previous years, they definitely do debate it well.
That was gonna be my comment, that if they were given 7, that they can cut down from 11, that yeah, there probably was a lot of I wanted to compliment. I think that they settled on some very, very excellent candidates. So,
agreed.
It's like,
well, if there's no further questions, we have a motion to recommend and approve the proposed Watershed Excellent Award winners.
so I would second it.
Wonderful. Further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. Moving on to the Woodbury Target Store project.
Yes, I put this in action items instead of consent just because of the size of the change order, and Erin wanted to talk through some of the conditions of the change order.
So you remember a few months ago, or I guess it was a couple months ago, I told you there would probably be a change order as we transitioned from one contractor to another, and so here we are. The project itself is essentially complete at this point. There's going to be one more payment application where we shore up a couple of items and then release retainage. But this, in combination with the memo that we'll talk through later in the meeting, kind of gives you a picture of the fallout or just sort of how we worked our way through the rest of the project. So there's a number of different changes here. Some of them were completely expected. A couple of them weren't, and one of them is a little bit unique, and so I just wanted to walk you through those. The first group, so this CO2A through CO2D, is regarding the purchase of additional materials. We fully expected this would happen. If you recall, last month we went through and set up the payment reimbursement for Carrilla Contracting for the materials they had on site, because those were used in the project. But in some instances, we didn't have enough materials for installation, and we knew that might be the case. So the agreement with Peterson had been, if that happens, order more supplies, show us your receipts, and we'll reimburse you for that amount of payment. And then they were paid for labor separately. So this was expected. And the volumes that they needed were reasonable. So that's what CO2A through D are about, those different quantities you see there. The second one was, this is something we've come across before in large commercial parking lots. We just came across some drain tile that was underneath the park. Sometimes this happens, you know, maybe there's a wet spot in some far-flung portion of the parking lot. They put a drain tile piece in and they patch it into a catch basin just to make sure that the parking lot stays dry. So every once in a while when we're retrofitting projects, we come across one of these. And when that happens, we need to patch that in somewhere. We can't just cut it off and then flood the parking lot underground. So that's what CO2E is. That's dealing with that drain tile connection that we found. And that went very smoothly, but it was some additional cost to the contractor. So that's what that one is. The next one is another thing that we have seen before in parking lot projects. This was an existing structure that was on the parking lot before we even dreamed of doing a retrofit project at the site. It was maybe installed a little poorly back in the day, and it was falling apart. And when you have a structure that has some, especially one that's conveying water, you get sediment washing out around the structure. And it's not something that we can patch into without fixing. So when we encounter this in the field, we instruct the contractor, please fix that so that our connection can have good integrity, and we'll include that change in the change order. That's not part of the original scope of the project.
I was going to ask you that. So this has no relevance to Carrilla and their work before?
Nope, this has nothing to do, no,
Okay.
this was just a structure we opened up because we needed to connect to it and it was kind of falling apart.
Okay.
So this pretty typical, but has nothing to do with prior portions of our project.
Okay.
So then CO2G through H are planned quantity changes. So on a bid form, and not to go into too much detail, but on a bid form, when you see you know, the itemized list of materials that need to go into a project, sometimes we indicate that the item will be paid based on the planned quantity. So that means we're not going to go out in the field and measure it. We're going to base it on the measurements in the drawings. Sometimes things change in the field and quantities need to change. And if it's a planned quantity, we need to, and if it's a big change, we have to make that change in a change order to indicate why the quantity changed over what was in the plan. So there's a couple different reasons we needed to change. And one of them was, again, we needed more of clean wash sand with 5% iron aggregate, and we needed, Peterson needed more materials. And so
the bituminous pavement though was really high if we were looking at surface.
Yeah. So out in the field, we made the decision that the amount of bituminous pavement that we wanted removed originally should be increased to better line up with a parking lane. So it was a decision made in the field for the betterment of the project. So bituminous pavement is expensive, but there was a good aesthetic reason to do that and line it up in the parking lot. So that's what that change was about. That was a change to the design.
And that change was only $7,000, just so, right? Is that correct?
Oh,
the
it looked like
bituminous-
88,000.
Well, at 88 was added, but then we're subtracting.
Oh, yeah, right.
Oh, could you help me with that?
Yeah, so this is, and actually that's a good time to talk about that. These change orders are essentially changing our contract documents. So we have to go through a pretty tedious narrative of saying, okay, for example, for these quantities, we're going to make a change to the bid form for these quantities. And we're saying, as things were originally written, remove that and in its place, add something else.
So there's a table below, that's the removal.
I definitely didn't catch that
Yep.
relationship.
Yeah, that's kind of how a change order is typically written. So actually at the bottom, if you want to see the itemized cost of all of these things, we're jumping around a little bit, but at the very bottom, you can see total impact on contract price. And that's where we've itemized what did all these different things cost. I guess to single out the bituminous pavement, I did lump that with planned quantity changes, clean wash sand, bituminous pavement and planting. So to get that itemized difference, you would look at like Tina was saying,
88.
88,660 essentially minus 81,000.
Thank you, I did not connect that.
It's not super intuitive. It's just, it is the way that we write the contract or the change orders. It's
Take note of that.
contract language, yeah. Yep. So the last item in this list is a little odd, and it has to do with the fact that we were in an emergency situation. So in this instance, so when Peterson originally bid on our project, they had one cost estimator who came up with their original bid. And then later, when we re-engaged Peterson to help us finish out the project, it was a different cost estimator. We didn't know that at the time. It doesn't really matter. But at the time, we were really thankful that Peterson was saying, we're going to use our original bid prices just to expedite this, and so that we're not like renegotiating individual unit prices for the most part. We had to change a couple things here and there because the nature of the project had changed. But in terms of excavation and disposal costs and a number of other items, they just went with the original bid item, the unit price, that is. So project gets completed and Peterson is pulling together their last pay app that you saw in the board packet tonight. And they realized that their original bid price, their unit price for things like trench drains, and what else did I put in here? I listed them out. Where is that? Give me just a second. I think it was trench drains, pipes. The trench drain was the biggest one.
Installation.
Yes, thank you. So for those items, their unit price incorrectly didn't include excavation of material that would be needed to install those items. And that's an error, because in our specs, we said, bid on this, bid on each structure, bid on linear feet of trench drain, including the cost of excavating material. They missed that. And that didn't come to light until just now, when they're tying out all their excavation and they're realizing we excavated a lot more material than your number for excavated material would indicate. And Katie, who's on, listening on the call, did some very thorough checking about volumes, like why is this discrepancy so big? And what it came down to was that the excavation involved with some of those other things, the trench drains, the structures, they were accounting for that in their excavated volume. So in using a unit price for the trench drains and other things, they stand to lose around $30,000 because of that error. Like I said, Katie checked all the volumes and made sure that that seemed about right, that their total excavated volume would have included those other things. And we actually do recommend that they do get paid for that. It does seem fair. And actually, when we looked back at their trench drain unit price, it did seem quite low compared to our engineer's estimate. So that seems to tie out and make some sense. We don't have any reason to believe that Peterson's not telling us the truth. You don't have to approve this. I mean, according to our specs, even in the transition, the specs were laid out pretty clearly that a unit price bid for, say, the trench drains was meant to include excavation. But given the turmoil and the changeover and kind of the hustle to switch over contractors, we kind of understand how that might have gotten missed in the transition. So we told them that we would bring that to the board. It is your decision. But it does, the numbers make sense, and it does seem fair. But that said, I want to make sure I entertain any questions.
I don't have a plan in front of me, so it's not like we gave them a plan estimate. This was them missing a quantity, which we typically wouldn't pay for, correct?
We gave them a plan estimate for the amount of excavation that would be needed just for the gardens. And so they had a bid for that price. And they had a unit price bid for like the trench drains, for example. But the price that they gave us, we all realized later, for the trench drains was pretty low, because they were assuming that the excavation would have been paid out under a different item. So it was a misinterpretation of how those items were meant to be paid out.
So it was a contractor error.
Contractor error, yeah. But two different people did the cost estimating, and the first person had made that error. And then when the second person came in the consideration, they didn't catch it. So that's how that,
And just to be clear, that's the 29,983.
yeah, that's right. It's a pretty unique situation.
I mean, my opinion is the work that was done under extenuating circumstances seems comfortable with paying. I want to open it up for other folks.
Well, I'm equally comfortable. I mean, to some degree, while it's a contractor's error, and as the summary memo also notes, we selected an initial contractor who was woefully inadequate. Agreed. Not that that mitigates the contractor's error, but to me, it suggests that, as you said, tightening our bid requirements for performance that would be advisable in the future.
Yeah.
I agreed. Yeah, I'm excited about the topic, but that's what Matt's referred to. How do others feel?
So if we were to include the 29, that's not over and above the, I think it's like roughly 10% beyond the engineer's estimate. It's not an added value, it's included in that.
In the memo.
That's a good distinction. So this change order, unlike the contract price that you noted on the pay app, this change order is included in the discussion of the total prices later for that other memo.
And the 550.
Yeah, so, yes.
So I'm looking at total impact on contract price, everything is included there, and that's 66,
Yeah.
and that's 66.9, almost 67. Is part of the number that is used to compare final costs.
Yeah, yeah, that's included. And I guess one thing I can say also, just as another way to explain the bottom line, because that was a bit of a convoluted tale to try to tell the whole story there. We're confident that you're not double paying for excavation.
Yeah. That
is the bottom line. There was a fair bit of accounting and back and forth with Peterson to ensure that it seemed right that we weren't somehow paying twice for excavation.
in this particular instance, it seems fair, but again, I want to open it up to other folks. I don't want to call on people. I see Ben and I have walked eyes a couple of times. I'm kind of curious what your thoughts are.
Oh, I'm, given the expediency and the fact that they didn't go back to review their bid, I'm okay with it in this instance, but contractor is a tough thing.
Agreed. It's a
Yeah.
fairly sizable one.
Had they been the original contractor and this comes in at the end,
Yeah,
I think that would probably be a different conversation.
yeah, agreed.
So.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I mean, I guess I'm knowing after my earlier comment that this doesn't put us further above what was envisioned. I guess I'm comfortable with it. I really do want to, just acknowledge, and this is discussed, in this item, that contract prices, contract specifications will be changed in the future for projects such as this, these underground trenches and so forth. There's a lot of complexity and we want to make sure.
Yep.
Kind of exclude folks that may not have the capabilities. I think that's a lesson learned and it makes sense. So.
Stephanie, would you like to weigh in?
Yeah, my thought is it's a contractor error. At best, I would split it. But yeah, I'm okay with paying more. This was a tough bid.
And we finished in September.
Yeah, and it's beautiful, so. But Dave is your hand raised for this?
Oh, yeah.
I like the way those has gone. I was just saying, out of all the years we've worked with Peterson, from lake level stations to other targets to you know, multiple projects over the last 10, 12 years or so, they've been fair on every single thing that I've ever worked with them on. So I mean, if they're asking and we worked through it, that I think it's a fair ask, and they wouldn't if they didn't really think that there was like an oh geez, whoops type of thing. So that's all.
And I'll just point out, so Katie, I've mentioned Katie, that's Katie Turbernagel, who's on the call. Katie, I don't know if you have anything to add on this, or certainly on the phone for the next memo too, but if there was anything I missed.
I think you described it really well, and
Oh, you know what? We can barely hear you, Katie. Kind of
oh,
muffled.
all the audio issues on Zoom today, huh?
You're really quiet.
Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I guess similarly, I had a Zoom update today and it decided to switch everything. Yeah, no, Aaron, I think you described it really well, and I don't have anything else to add unless there's any other specific questions.
So do I have a motion to approve change order number 2?
So moved. Second.
All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed say nay. All abstain say abstain. Okay, change order 2 passes. Thank you for the discussion. Moving forward, I'll hand it over to you, Lauren. The attorney report.
Yes. Many kind of just typical straightforward contract reviews this month. It's good, I think, when those come across my desk. So we kind of have a feel on access and rights and across the different projects that are going on. There was quite a bit of back and forth with the St. Paul Port Authority on the Beltline outlet, and we finally got a signed access agreement on that. Was that just earlier this week or late last week? So that took quite a bit of communication, but we have a signed agreement, and I know the contractor is eager to get out there. They probably already have since that's been signed.
Yep.
Yep, there you go. So yeah, so a little bit more, you know, coming through our office this month, but overall in a good place tonight.
Thank you so much, Lauren. Any questions for Lauren? Wonderful.
Thank you.
Moving forward to board discussion topics. Any topics that the board would like to bring up tonight? Okay, for future meetings, feel free to email Tina or anyone else if you have comments or discussions you'd like to touch base on. Just looking at what's coming up next, I really would love to jump into the Woodbury Target Project contract summary and have that discussion.
Sounds good.
Action items. Is that you, Tina, or is it Aaron's going to take it?
Kick it off, or
Yeah. Yeah, so because construction is essentially complete, except for some tie out at the end, it seemed like a good time to give you an update on how things landed, where they landed in terms of the contract price, where they landed in terms of engineering, what that meant in terms of cost effectiveness of the project. You know, a lot of things have changed since we originally brought this project to the board with our planning level engineering estimate of cost. And, you know, and as we have already discussed, this was a bumpy one and a unique one. And so now that the dust has settled and plants have been planted and Target has their full run of their parking lot again, it was just a good time to give you an accounting and have some discussion about what that looked like, what you got for that investment, and lessons learned as we go forward. So, you know, we laid this out describing how things landed. We feel very good about the construction integrity of the project, and that what went in the ground is what we designed, and that the phosphorus and sediment removals that we estimated are the ones that you can expect. I went ahead and in the beginning part of the memo, reminded us all of what the engineering estimate of opinion of cost was, what that range looked like. And given a phosphorus removal of 6.4 pounds, what that means in terms of the annualized cost benefit of the project. So with that range and that removal of phosphorus, we get a range of 10,100 to 11,000. Oh, I'm sorry, right, with the original estimate, 10,100 to 11,500 pounds of phosphorus. And to put that into context, that's pretty typical for a regional big BMP. That's kind of the range that we typically see for these larger projects. Definitely represents projects that have been deemed worthy of implementation by the board in the past. So these are not outliers. We've certainly done projects out there that are higher cost per pound than that. We've certainly done some that are lower, but this is pretty typical. So updating that cost per pound removed per year with the way the prices are seeming to land, again, including the change orders, including returning of retainage and the pay app that you just approved, we're landing at about $11,700 per pound of phosphorus removed. So it went up a little bit. For us, again, looking within that range, that's not a extremely significant change. You're still in a reasonable zone for removal efficiency.
Could you help be more quantitative on what the typical zone is, just for reference?
Yes.
I mean, a $200 per pound increase to me, I don't know if that's a large scale.
Sure.
It sounds like it isn't. I mean, from a percentage standpoint, it doesn't look like it.
Yeah, and you know, I'm wishing I had brought up, we did at a previous board packet, probably before maybe any of you were on the board, we did include that in a project status report, and I could certainly reissue that for next month or even email it after the meeting. You know, we have kind of a bell curve with a bit of a skew that goes anywhere from 400 to, you know, 20, 30, much higher.
I think that number you're thinking of was like around 10,000, but that was probably like what we.
No, I'm saying, I'm saying the whole curve is like all the projects from small to very, very large.
Right.
But the typical range, I think, in that graphic, there's a typical range that's like, I mean, I think the average was like 10,300 or something like that.
You can just send it to us after.
I'll send it,
I have seen it. I recall like 14,000 being the top of your typical.
Right.
Yeah.
Top of our typical, I think that's like 80% of projects are within that range, but I'll send it out.
That would be really helpful.
Included in the, I guess it would be the.
There was a
When the
report
board
that had it.
decides on if they're gonna pursue a project, we always include it in there with the estimated. So you saw it probably during this target.
It'd be great to refresh.
Well, I apologize. That would have been nice to have. Yes, we will send that back out so you can see it, because it is hard to know what the context behind those are. But suffice it to say, it's definitely, this falls within the range of pretty typical.
Okay.
So that was nice to see. And I wanted to share that with the board. Any other questions on that metric? Okay. So then we go into looking at, end of project construction costs. How is this landing? And you see in the bulleted list there that now that the materials have been reimbursed to Carrilla, we got through the pay applications and there's still some retainage waiting. Their total is $308,356.42. That's how we see that landing. And then Peterson's, and this is estimated, like I said, there will be a little finalizing of prices next month, but we don't anticipate anything huge. Including pay apps and return of retainage, it's looking like their contract price will be somewhere around $606,121.12. It will probably be slightly higher than that just from that final accounting, but that's around where it's landing. So if you sum those two together, you get about $914,500. So that's, that's slightly higher than the upper end of our range, but I do remind the reader here that that range is not based on the assumption that your contractor may need to be swapped mid-project. That's based on more engineering estimates of variation in material costs and mobilization assumptions and things like that. So, but nonetheless, that was the range that you were thinking of with the project to go to bid.
Just being overly thorough, the 914K was used in the 11.7 per pound TP removal.
Yes.
Okay, just wanted to being overly thorough.
Yep, no, that's fair. And so that's where you can see the difference, 914,500 related to 11.7, whereas 898,000 related to 11.5.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just
Yep.
trying to keep it track.
Oh, it's a lot of numbers, so. And then I go through a list of why the engineering or why the construction prices were higher. You know, they're the change orders we just talked about, there are things that were found in the field. There's also just the inefficiency of changing up a contractor, 2 mobilizations, and some, you know, some inefficiencies in the transfer of the project between contractors.
I think the challenge for me on the mobilizations both ways, it seems, as I revisit the conversations from the termination of the earlier contract, that seems it is frustrating to see,
Yeah.
but I understand.
Yep.
why.
Yep, that's understandable. Any questions about the construction costs? Nothing there. Okay.
Hear me out speaking for myself, maybe.
Okay, so then the next piece was the end of project engineering costs. So, you know, whenever you get a scope summary from us, we present our estimate of what we think it'll take. So the scope summary for the Woodbury Target project, I think, was originally shown to the board, I mean, I think 1.5 to 2 years ago. And that included final design, plans, specs, bidding, construction observation. And at the time, our estimate was around $193,000. Well, now that the project's coming to a close, we can see that we're landing closer to 300,000, and because of all of the things that I mentioned down below. Some of that was changes to the project that were unforeseen, had nothing to do with Corilla, but had to do with doing business in a commercial parking lot. Property management company required some changes, and that meant we needed to go back to the drawing board on some plans. But I mean, I think the main piece, not surprisingly, is just the substantial increase in construction oversight that was needed for the project. And the work in terminating the contract. Yeah.
Can you help me understand why we don't include the engineering costs in the total cost for TP pound removal?
You know, that is something that we decided a long time ago. I think typically we see those numbers that different entities are pulling together, not including engineering. You have to decide where you're cutting it off, right? Like, do you cut it off? Do you cut the whole project from the very beginning to the very, very end, including engineering? Or are you looking only at construction, or are you looking at plans, specs, bidding, and construction? So typically when we see that metric, which is one that's used quite a lot in the watershed world, it's typically just construction costs. So it's not meant to hide anything. It's just, in order to compare apples to apples, we're typically only looking at construction costs.
Yeah, I was like mentally doing some math on what it might end up being, and it could be closer to 12K per pound of TP removal being included. So I was just trying to understand.
Yeah, well, and I think maybe, I mean, so we typically don't include that, but nonetheless, I think that points to how it will be useful for you to see the curve of what has been spent in the past. Again, that's just construction, but to get a sense of the sensitivity of that. Yeah, that's a good question. Any other questions about engineering costs? Okay, so then the logical question is, you know, what was the budget again for this from the district's perspective? Where is this money coming from? Is this all okay? And I guess I'll let Paige, do you want to weigh in on that? I mean, this was about the SIF.
Yes. Sorry, Paige. Yeah, so we had budgeted. Okay, so we originally allocated, you know, this same time last year. Ally budgeted 950,000 for this project, and then we have stormwater impact fund dollars, which comes out of our permitting program when projects can't meet the stormwater management rules on site. They pay into our stormwater impact fund, so we had those funds set aside in this same drainage area and or within the city of Woodbury allocated for this project. So that will cover the construction costs. We typically only use that for construction costs now. Engineering and yeah, any other costs, implementation dollars. Yeah. And then the overage on the engineering costs will come out of the targeted retrofit allowance, which we have carryover funds available.
Questions on that? Okay, so lessons learned. You know, the district is required to publicly bid their projects. And there's a lot of good reasons for that, but it does leave us vulnerable to this kind of thing happening. So we have a paragraph in here about changing our specifications to be more targeted in terms of requiring qualifications. I want to make sure folks understand that those qualifications are inherent to, you know, someone bidding on a project. There are, you know, there is that level of expectation with anyone bidding on your projects that they are bidding in good faith, expertise required to do the project. We used to put more layers on. So when we started to implement rainwater gardens, they were pretty new and pretty, you know, you had to be pretty careful with them in terms of construction, and a lot of contractors didn't know how to do it. So originally, a while ago, we did put some pretty strong requirements on, you need to show us 3 projects that include exactly this, this, and this. And then after some time, those elements weren't quite so novel anymore, and it felt like it was a little bit constraining because there was more general knowledge about how to build these things. We didn't want to be narrowing the list of folks that could do projects. And so we took those things off, and that worked pretty darn well for a good long time. We're now in the marketplace seeing a lot of new companies come on board, which is great for the market, but it does mean that there are folks coming on that maybe don't have expertise in some of these things. So, you know, we would recommend that for these kinds of projects that have, again, some of these specific things that we mentioned here, the filtration basins, working on commercial properties, installation of trench drains, that we get specific again with our qualification requirements in terms of requiring exact and proof of prior expertise in these, on those specific project elements, rather than the more general requirements that we have in our typical specs. Because we are seeing smaller, newer contractors that we don't know and have no experience with. And when you ask for references, you get references, but you get the references that they give you. And people are hesitant to maybe tell you things that, I mean, or maybe they just had different experiences, but it's hard to get, it's potentially hard to get meaningful feedback. So.
Could you help me understand how that gets implemented? Because this was
Yeah.
a multi-segmented and multifaceted program.
Yeah.
So would that text require proof of existing experience across all the different facets? Or?
Well, it would be project by project, right? So I think, you know, in retrospect, which 2020 is, vision is a lot better. You know, I think we could have put, it would have been in the instructions to bidders portion of the specifications that any bidder has to submit 3 project examples that include rain gardens, trench drains, and they have to show, give a project example that was on a commercial property. I mean, we shouldn't have to do that, but I think for some of these things, it makes sense. You know, yeah, so I think project by project, if there are certain elements that we feel are particularly critical, even if it seems like potential overkill, it's certainly something that we can do relatively easy by updating our instructions to bidders and requiring that at the time of bidding.
I'm wondering what the implications may be for costs over a wide range of projects that have these kinds of aspects to them. If we are putting additional specifications, and I earlier said I support it.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if it would narrow the range of potential bidders.
Yeah.
And as soon as that pool is narrowed and there's some folks trying to get in,
right,
the likelihood of low bids,
right,
I mean, it has the potential of raising costs.
Yeah, I think that's why this isn't a blanket thing. I think it depends on the project. And we want to use that lever carefully because that is exactly why we took those off in the first place. I mean, this project got 15 bidders.
It's,
I mean, the low bid is typically the person that doesn't know what they're getting into.
Or could be.
EC.
Yeah,
I-
right.
building on what Ben said, is there some sort of trigger based off of the engineering estimate that would lead us to asking for specific examples? For example, I mean, the grill
Yep.
came in really, really low.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that there's a clear threshold or
Yep.
boundary there. But
Right, well, so they did come in really low, and so because of that, I mean, it says right in our specifications, we may ask you for references and, prior examples of work. And so they did that, and they gave us references and we chased them down, and there wasn't anything obvious. I mean, to throw out a low public bid is a big deal. And so there wasn't anything obvious that was like, okay, these guys, they don't know how to do this. And we also hadn't required specific prior experience on an infiltration basin, or, that wasn't pulled out as a specific. So, yeah, but to your point, I mean, that's the thing, it's the balancing of those two things. How do we make sure that if there's critical project elements that we're a little worried about for a specific site, then we will be more likely to recommend that get included. But you're right, that does narrow your pool. And it closes the door to people that are newer and trying to work on your project. So I don't think it's an everything project sort of thing. It would have been helpful on this project.
there's another new company that we are pursuing. I'm blanking on which permanent is for, which project is for, isn't there?
Wasn't a new, not a
Oh,
new
is it?
contractor, just we hadn't worked with them. It was between
Maybe
us.
that's what I'm
Oh,
recalling.
yeah.
Yes,
Ramsey,
that's the
yeah.
one I'm thinking.
Yeah,
Okay.
But
So-
they were well known
Oh, yeah.
amongst the industry on our projects.
yeah. They've been a sub on
And that
many
was a
many of
pilot
your
project
projects.
is a little,
Yeah,
Well,
more
I'm just trying to
standard
think through
project.
like the
Right.
recent ones that we've
Right.
used.
yeah.
Are you all, since I appreciate the language here being, I'm curious about what the trigger factor would be.
Yeah,
Because I fear the same thing. I don't want bids to be inflated higher than necessary, but I
Right.
don't want to get caught up where this ended up being significantly more expensive than what was
Right.
anticipated.
well, it could, I mean, yeah, I think that's the question. I think it could be something that, when we bring projects a few different times, right? For you to understand, like, here's the concept design, here's 90 to 100% design. Can we put this out to bid? Do you agree we should do this project? And it may be appropriate at that time for us to say, here are the critical project elements. We do or don't recommend tightening up qualifications on this and getting a discussion about that. I mean, that's one thing that we could try. And as far as what triggers, I mean, I can say from our perspective, what triggers is a really low bid, whether it's for a company we know or not, because whenever there's a bid opening, we are asking around bar and, district staff, like, who knows about these folks? But another outlier is we look at the line items for every bid item. And so if the apparent low bidder has some outliers in a particular line item, we make sure we call that to their attention. And we did that. We met with Perla and said, hey, you're really low on this item, or this is really low. Are you sure? And we will even say, like, here's the range. You don't want to show a contractor everyone else's bid because that's sort of proprietary, information. But we say this was the range for this particular item. You're really an outlier. Do you want to go forward? And if they decide not to go forward, they lose their bid bond. So they have incentive to stay in, but they do have an option to be out if they want to. So those are those are the various checkpoints and things that did happen on this project. But yeah.
I like the idea of whether it's concept or design, discussing unique elements, but I'm actually much more intrigued by your very last sentence in your memo.
Yeah.
Which is, it's human nature to be reluctant to call people out that, hey, I think you're failing.
Right.
But to the degree that we can do that better, I'm
Yeah.
much more comfortable doing that than putting in unique requirements in a bid that limit
Yeah.
the bid pool.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, I think we gave them a couple of chances. And, you know, in retrospect, well, especially given this experience, I think, you know, now, yeah, like knowing how that was tracking and how, I think we would choose one of those earlier outs. It was a unique situation. I mean, we don't typically have a contractor that decides they're not capable of finishing a project. Never seen that before, but now that we've been through that all together, yeah, I do think that we've learned some things that we can take into the next project.
I think
So-
that's gonna be the hardest to figure out a good trigger again.
Yep.
Because they came in so low and you would think change order after change order, they'd still be one of the lower total costs.
Mhm.
I do agree with Matt. I mean, saying no earlier is great. We all fall victim to some costs, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, and it is, I mean, it's a big deal, you know, to terminate a contractor for cause. That's pretty rare in the industry. And that's not the path that was chosen on this project. It was a mutual, this needs to stop, but, it's not I mean, I don't think you're saying it's a decision to make lightly. But I think having gone through this situation, I think we'll know a little, we'll recognize this path. If we,
I like
see
your
it.
earlier proposal when it comes time to like a 90%
Yeah.
complete, saying, hey, there's these unique aspects of the contract for this
Yeah.
particular project would help
Yeah.
us ask more informed questions with bids coming.
Yeah. Yep.
Because I like having the range of bids come in.
Mhm.
We should spend more time scrutinizing it, so with some keywords or call outs for uniqueness in these areas, I think that would make us, inform us to ask questions. I don't know how others feel on that. At least, for, you know, when they get to the 90% bid, at that point in time, you know, there's some very
Yeah.
unique
Oh,
things.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
So even
Yep.
early.
Yeah.
I think it's something that certainly should entertain trying. Maybe not make a full-on commitment, but
Right.
it seems to me that there is some degree of objective. It's hard to really capture these with certainty.
Mhm.
But it brings us to a realm of, this is so complicated, and it's going to have some real definitive specifications and experiences needed. Given that I would benefit from a recognition that that's being called out. I don't have the technical wherewithal to necessarily pull that, so I think it would be valuable to explore how that works.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I could see us saying, we, you know, for the next project X, you know, we don't recommend putting additional requirements in this project because X, Y, and Z, or we do recommend saying we want to see examples of the, you know, and here's why. We should be able to say that at a 90%. Yeah.
There's already language saying that we'll look for references and
Yeah.
examples. It's just if there's some uniqueness, we
Yeah.
leverage the language that's already there and then ask
Right.
for something
Right.
specific.
Right, we'd have specific qualifications.
That's
Right, we would say you can't, if you
You
have
can't
never
bid
worked
on
on a
this.
commercial site, you can't bid on this project. That's what's not in there now. Now there's a little more grace. Because these projects, yeah, there were some complicated things on this project. We've done these projects elsewhere in the metro and not had this
this was
happen.
our last target, I'm sure, if I recall that
Yes.
correctly. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
But not our last retrofit project.
and not a less commercial parking lot, but yeah,
Yeah.
that would be the difference is if there's a project where, whatever, something about the stakeholders, something about the urgency of the project, we could say, don't bid on, you know, you're not eligible to bid on this project if you don't have this kind of experience. So show us that you've done this, or we won't accept your bid.
I like maintaining the openness and then having folks who are more closely aligned or understand construction to call out these things so we can elevate them for discussion topics.
Yep.
That feels more my speed,
Yep.
or at least where I fall. In terms of what Matt brought up earlier around how we trigger jumping out, we only meet once a month, and I think there were several instances across the months in which we encountered difficulty, and so I don't know, does that require a special meeting or any?
I think if it were that serious of a situation, I would call
You'd
for
call a
that.
special meeting, okay.
But, you know, I think it takes time for staff to kind of go through that process
Yeah.
too, and with legal to get to that point where we probably would be able to fall, you know.
I just remember conversations leading up to it and the discussion. Oh, did Lauren? Oh, sorry. Dan.
Oh, I just raised it. I didn't mean to be called on so quickly.
When you did, so-
I haven't been sitting here waiting, don't worry, but so I think this is, everyone at the table knows this, but from a legal standpoint, the district really needs to accept the lowest responsible bidder. Any choice to not choose the lowest responsible bidder needs to be heavily discussed and noted in the minutes, because that is what the statute requires. I think the suggestion to say, hey, this is how you're going to show us up front before you even bid, you will be determined not a responsible bidder unless you can prove that you have the required skills and history.
But Lauren, we can do that per request or put out to bid, right? We don't have to do that uniform across all bids. Okay, good. I just wanted
Project
to
by
check.
project, yeah.
Yep.
Yep.
And I think Bart has, such extensive knowledge of kind of what size projects this would become more important or less important, or, what the features are that would require this level of scrutiny. But from my perspective, much harder to deny the lowest bidder after the bidding comes through without some kind of clear reasoning. And I think this is the exact example, because to what Aaron said was they were the lowest, and by so much that even we had a conversation about, okay, what else should we require of them? And they complied with all of that. So the district did not have legal standing to say, we're just unsure about you, Carilla. We're going to move on to the next. You really need to have significant justification to deem them irresponsible or not responsible.
We
So
retrospectively get more specific then on the words we would have used to catch this scenario before it happened. What would we have said? For example, would we have said, show me experience with drainage tiles and trench?
Is
Like,
the trench drain, was that their stumbling point? Could they not hit inverts, or was it the infiltration basin? What was the point where they were?
That's what I'm
I
trying to
think it
figure
was
out.
a little more of that. It wasn't, I don't know, this is gonna be something we need to really think about for the next project. So actually, and Katie, you should feel free to chime in on this. I think the issue with this one was, it wasn't so much the infiltration basins. That wasn't so much the issue. I think where it really got complicated was retrofitting, not just a trench drain, but a trench drain that had very little vertical leeway in a commercial parking lot where the rental property was a little touchy. And I'm not casting judgment on that. Commercial properties are really hard to work in because they're trying to do business. So I'm not judging that, but I think there was a time constraint. There were really, really tight tolerances in a retrofit setting with a lot of people around. Safety was never a worry on this project, but I think it was a combination of those factors and not necessarily just trench drains or infiltration basins. So, I don't know how you would write that. Maybe you would just say trench drains because it's a tight one. Katie, I don't know if you have anything.
Was it they just wanted more time to put in these trench drains to hit?
No, they didn't. They were not really.
They just weren't comfortable doing it.
They did not have enough experience to do that. And the other tricky part is they were going to sub to someone who did have the experience, but then they changed their mind on that, and we can't control who their subs are. So another reason why it seemed like, well, okay, we know this sub, it'll be okay, we've worked with that sub before, great. And then they started running tight on money because things were taking longer, and we were correcting a lot of things, and then they were gonna do it themselves. And then they were having trouble setting structures to the tight tolerances. So it just kind of eroded.
So it might not be trench drain related, but tolerance to.
It might be, yeah,
elevation.
it might be the difficulty of the retrofit as a whole, but we could still tie that out to be experienced with these certain elements. Katie, do you have anything to add on that? But
Yeah, I think the only other thing I would add, I mean, and we've said this multiple times that it's going to be very specific project by project, but I think just the nature of how specifically like iron enhanced sand basins work is that you have to install things like very quickly. Like they have, like you start this process, like this has to happen immediately preceding that. And then they just really struggled to meet that commitment. They didn't have like a big enough crew to really meet that. They didn't have materials on site in a sufficient time. So it might specifically be having contractors provide examples where like, you know, what were some, I don't know, larger projects where you know, needed to meet a tight timeline, and like provide that as an example, just to kind of help demonstrate in a way that they have like crew, material, equipment, knowledge to like be able to support doing a bigger project at a faster time frame.
yeah, though we did check on materials and crews and commitments. I think somehow taking the spirit of that, but tying it to some sort of pre-bid specific condition that Lauren's checking. I think, you know, to get us out of the muddy bit where you're trying to decide if someone's responsible or not.
Seems like there's a twofold thing here that we might need to experiment next time we do a bid.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
my proposal would be, you know, the next time we do a bid, maybe you can help identify that.
Yep.
The point that Matt highlighted is I'd love to understand what kind of checks would we have to
Sure.
figure out whether
When a project is going.
Yes,
Yeah.
because I don't know if I fully have a grasp on that, just
Yeah.
honestly. So I
Yeah.
think if we could find a way to incorporate that and learn through the
Yeah.
process, that would
That's
be
fair.
very helpful.
Yeah.
I don't know how others feel about that. I don't think we're gonna solve it tonight, is my
Right.
point. So I just wanna see the next time a bid
Yeah.
comes through, what the judgment is, we'll adjust accordingly, and then.
Yeah.
I think one thing to remember too is this was a perfect storm of sorts. And while we want to make sure that we're learning those lessons for next time, we also, we don't see that, you know, like this is the first time we've experienced to this degree. So let's, yeah, I think it's good to kind of wade our way into this to see.
We have a history of working really well with bidders. They come through, they seem to typically work out.
Yeah.
So I wanna slow roll it and
Absolutely.
see
Yeah,
what you guys
exactly.
propose as bids go on.
Yep.
Yeah, that sounds good.
I don't think there's any need for motion, but that would be my
Yeah.
proposal.
No,
How
I
do
don't think
others
we need
feel
motion.
about that? Seem reasonable? I just don't wanna blanket or add new requirements to.
Right.
to
I don't think
this
it should
point.
blanket
Yeah.
it.
Anyway.
No.
It's what I was trying to express earlier in terms of, it seems like it's something that we need to gain a little bit more comfort with
Agreed.
the discretion of which projects do we need to have the
Yeah.
enhanced specifications and which don't we? And where I was trying to encourage, you know, Bar has technical expertise. I
Agreed.
think we could really benefit by your insights and saying, yeah, this has got this, and this.
Yeah.
And kind of make the recommendation or the
Yeah.
suggestion, and then we gain that, you know, benefit.
That would be really wonderful. So
Yeah.
try something next time, and what flags and measures we'll use to back out.
Yeah. That sounds reasonable. And I just also want to say thank you for the support and patience of the board. This was a really painful one for a lot of us in the room and online. So just thank you for helping navigate that.
I would like to say a special thanks to Katie, who put in 1,000,000 hours on this, and lots of hand holding. She did an amazing job with all this.
Yep, she did.
Thank you all. That was a very meaty discussion. Thank you.
Lots to talk about.
Let's talk about this new area oxygen sensor on the Wakefield Lake aeration, forgive me.
Yeah, so this is a new scope summary. It's something that we have included in our draft 2025 budget. So this is for your information about how we plan to move forward with this. This is a research project, so it's coming out of our research for 2025. And it was based on that presentation that Keith gave a few months back regarding shallow lake systems and a potential, alternative to alum treatments.
I seem to recall that stack for the pump and O2 sensor being fairly near the surface in the discussion. I assume that isn't of concern for the Wakefield Lake.
Well, I think that'll be part of
That'll be part of the study.
Yeah,
study,
that would
looking at the conceptual design and how this could work in the system or not. I mean, that's.
Question on the schedule, I'm assuming it's all 2025 instead of February 2024.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Go back in time. And
Indeed,
such
yes.
will be 2025.
I
Big
already
catch.
did. No, that's 2025, yes, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, Stephanie. I missed that.
I did.
Any questions on the Wakefield Lake aeration?
Yeah, just on the task four, I guess, will that also include the cost of maintenance or?
Yes,
Good question.
absolutely.
Wonderful. Let's move to the administrative report. Tina, I hand it to you.
Yes, so I got a list of my meetings, upcoming things to note, the highlighted there for you as well. Staff anniversaries, I made special mention of Sage's. Sage's anniversary is coming up this month, and then, as you know, we'll be celebrating her retirement in December, so more to come on that for sure. The board action log is there. I didn't make any changes to it from last month, so that is the same update. Minnesota watersheds, again, you should be seeing, actually, I think in the newsletter that just went out, there was a link to some materials or some draft agendas for the annual meeting. That registration information, I think, might be included in that email as well. So you can take a look at that, and then I'll have Emily send out a request to board members to get confirmation of whether or not you're going to attend the event. And then for the November meeting, you'll see the whole Minnesota watersheds packet for the annual meeting, which will include any resolutions and other board agenda items for Minnesota watersheds for your information.
Did you want to speak to anything on the Wakatipi invitation to the Otakui gathering?
Yes, did you respond to?
I have not. I'm not familiar with it.
Yeah. So Wakatipi is holding a fundraising event tomorrow night.
The third, yeah.
Yeah, tomorrow night. Sage is attending from our office. I wasn't planning to have any other staff, especially in our regulatory, capacity, or just for conflict of interest.
That makes sense.
But Sage, through our community outreach, I thought was appropriate for her to attend. But Bella also received an invitation.
I'll reach out. Thank you.
Yeah. And then I just included some information about staff that are giving presentations regarding projects for Ramsey-Washington in the next few months. We're really heading into conference season, so it's a few presentations there for you to hear about.
Yeah. Can we get do recordings of them or later on?
They don't record at the Water Resources Conference, but we will, at that point, the presentation will be completed. We could either record them for you, in the office, or we could have
Just
set some time aside.
With all the use of Zoom, most of the conferences we've attended
Yeah.
in this role, they don't record any information.
Yeah.
It's a point of frustration.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
Or just
I would ju-
seeing your notes? That
I would
be
love the
great.
notes or presentation
can
put in the
share that.
document library or something to that.
Yeah.
I think Matt mentioned this earlier, but the completed action items, we can just clean those off. I appreciate you keeping track of them.
Yep.
We can
Yeah.
clean.
Sounds good. Oh, yeah.
Wonderful. So, we're gonna move forward to the program status report. As we typically do, I have questions as we go through, but if you have one between, just interrupt, please. I had a question on the Ames Lake area flooding risk. I'm assuming that the target time for us to get a sense from HRA is next calendar year.
I think by the end of this year.
We're hoping by the end of this year.
Hopeful, yes, but we haven't gotten, well, I can let you speak, but I
Yeah,
don't think
no,
we've gotten an
I haven't.
update yet, so.
Hopefully by the end of the year.
So last year, the permit or the grant application was in April. Is that right? Yeah, so that would be our next target timeframe by April. We should be able to really package it up very similarly, so we wouldn't have a lot of work on our end. It's just that letter that would be needed.
Quick question on B. I don't recall us having a discussion around what happens if we cannot final pipe segment completed on that property owners.
Well, we won't realize the flood risk reduction for that person's property.
That one property.
Yeah.
Oh, that's what I was
Yeah.
curious about.
So it's just the one that won't allow the access that would be impacted by that.
So ultimately it becomes the city's responsibilities and their
that's
emergency
correct.
response. Okay, that's the mitigation. Thank you. On the Owasso, on D, on the Owasso Basin flood risk reduction, I really enjoyed the conversations and lessons learned with respect to the contractor. This one seems like an interesting one where it might benefit us to do a lessons learned. Is there an amount of engagement that we should have done earlier, or we had done earlier that maybe not? I would love just to understand how we can learn from this event, losing kind of the interest of the two landowners through a fairly already well-developed process, I thought. You get what I'm asking for. I'm
Yeah.
just trying to understand, could we have done something different there, interacting with the landowners earlier?
Yeah, I think, I mean, just off the top of my head, and we can do a lessons learned memo, but we were very involved with them from the very beginning.
That's what I
It wasn't like,
thought.
well, part of the problem, I will say,
They hired their own.
potentially, is that we were talking to the on-site people very early on. We probably could have brought in the national company, national owners earlier, so it's true. But yeah, I can talk with Brandon about doing a lessons learned.
Yeah, I mean, and it doesn't have to be in depth as we just
Yeah,
talked through. It'd be
right.
wonderful just to see.
Yeah,
us
just
do
talk
that.
through that. That's a good idea.
Right. Come all the way down to N.
I have a question on M. There's a potential stewardship grant for a project at the Grove Church in Woodbury. And then the statement was the size of the project may move it into a targeted retrofit program. If that's the case, then does that do anything with the three potential projects that were targeted for 2020?
Oh, good question. Yes, this would be for a 2026 target retrofit. Yeah, so Ashley and Marcy met out with them a couple weeks ago, along with Washington Conservation District, and there was just a good potential for a number of BMPs, potential pigments removal. Yeah, and just given that scope, we thought it could transfer to that, but they're not really on a strict timeline. So we said if it would transfer to that program, then they'd be fine.
Okay, thanks.
On N, I'm happy to see this added. This is a new one, so I greatly appreciate it. It does sound like they've made a lot of progress there. Is there updates that maybe on a future time you can share about how they're going to address that intersection into the belt line?
Well, we're waiting for that.
Oh, that's still an outstanding one. Okay.
And so we would anticipate when they submit their permit application, well, I mean, I'm sure we'll be in communication with them before that, but, so we might have further updates before they do their permit application. I haven't heard any update on timeline. Originally, they thought they would be submitting for permit now, by now, but I don't anticipate that happening in a couple months, but.
Well, I mean, it sounds like
The
they're,
next couple of months. Okay, so at that point in time, then you'll be able to determine if there's an impact, I mean, what the dollar impact would be for the tie-in as well as the proposed maintenance.
Yeah, we had a meeting that is shown here for September 2024 with Milestone Partners, which is a project management consultant, and I think it was a little bit of a better understanding for them on our concerns. And even though we've been reiterating them throughout the whole process, I think they really started to get a better feel for why we're requiring so much care and caution in that part of the project. And so I haven't heard an update since we've met with them, but I would anticipate that we'll hear soon about maybe a revised schedule or a revised plan. And we can give you an update as we know. And we can keep this in here, if we have something each month to share with you.
I don't know if the connection is gonna be considered high risk or what, but Nicole will often bring a project to us before the permit, and I just feel like this one would warrant that discussion prior to voting on a permit.
Yeah, I mean, we can suggest that to them as well.
it's similar to what is it, 3 months ago, or I can't recall when it became.
I mean, it may help them in the long run, because if we have a comment and we're not willing to vote on it, I mean, timeline wise might help.
One of the things we talked with them about is alternatives to tying into the belt line, and so my hope is that they were taking that back to the program team, and if they continue to go down the road of direct tie-in, then yeah, I think that would be wise for them to have that discussion with you all before
That'd be great.
it comes through.
Would be great. Good suggestion. My next, no, I don't need to ask that question. I just didn't know how often we present to the city engineering conference. That was the first time I recall seeing a reference to that particular conference, but it seems like a good group of folks to get involved with. That was my only comment. For Paul's work on the national resources, are there like published schedule for some of those? I've been trying to figure out how to understand that work better. And I read these each time and they're like, man, if I would have known some time in advance, that would have been one I would have loved to participate in or learn
to participate, yeah. Do you hear that, Paul? You have a volunteer here.
Yeah, I did hear that.
I have a young back. I can work.
I have a very rough schedule in my mind, and we as a team we have things usually planned out just using an Outlook calendar, and then we have a work week calendar that's always changing and shifting as we go through the week. But I can definitely, when we have more defined bigger projects going on, I'd be happy to let the board know when those are coming.
That would be wonderful.
Just to follow on that, I know there's, in the past at least, the CAC has oftentimes really kind of asked for or really appreciated the opportunity to provide some volunteer time. And I'm wondering if it might not be a good idea I think it would be a good idea, if they're going to kind of schedule that'd be an opportunity for the board to be invited as well. Then we have, that'd be a nice intersection between CAC and the board. Because it's kind of informal and, it's hands-on learning.
Yeah, I was actually discussing with Carrie today, the CAC. We don't have any big plantings planned. If you saw in my update there, we're going to plant that project next spring. So there should be plenty of room for involvement for the CAC and students, board members when we plant that next spring. I'm kind of glad that we're not planting with this flash drought that we have. But we are discussing a possible seed collection event with the CAC this fall. Go to one of our existing sites and collect seed that we can use on our other restoration sites. So, and then we do have a buckthorn bust planned on Hanlow's Pond, which is over in White Bear Lake towards the end of the month. So I can give that information to Tina and give it to you all if you're interested.
Yeah, just those collisions, those intersections are really great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Last question that I have, besides the welcome verb, like the verbal welcome to the new individual coming on board, is those illustration projects would be wonderful for like a board onboarding type of package, right? So let me be more like, you know what I mean? So if we have a new board member, these illustrations I can see help paint a picture of what's critical and educate folks, maybe bring them up the curve faster.
That reminds me, you said board onboarding. One of the topics, I sent out the Metro Watersheds meeting announcement, that's for October. The topic for the presentation for that meeting is going to be some training modules that Bowser is putting together for new board members. They're going to be videoed so that anytime a new board member comes on board. So if you're able to attend that meeting, that's an in-person meeting in October at Cap Region. That'd be great for your input. Otherwise, I can share that information after the fact too, and then get your input on those. So that reminded me about the board. 24th, 22nd, Tuesday. Yep.
Welcome, Cooper. That's really it. And I'm done with my comments. So,
yeah, on the last, second to last, the communications and outreach. I'm wondering if Lauren could, in her presentation of the kind of the social networking, it's always helpful to see we've got lots of hits, we've got lots of interest, but kind of like what's done with the stewardship grants, would it be doable to kind of have last month and this month, side by side, so we can see a little bit of a trend? Or if she could comment on it, somehow just get a sense of those numbers, how are they trending?
Sure, that's a good idea.
So then I can't let that one go. So not the same thing, but on the social networking for the recognition dinner. Are there plans to kind of encourage cross communication or as we enter
For the watershed excellence.
for the November 21st
for attendance of it.
For the people who are in attendance. Yeah.
I see. Yeah.
So I really like the fact, because I did it last year, but the communication of SALT education at the table, but just, it's a great opportunity. Everybody is in the room. So I don't know, I'm not suggesting speed dating, but something of the sort to, so we actually have a chance to talk to people. To actually mingle with people who are in the room.
One of the things that came up in water resource conference planning was to have table topics, basically. That would be like a social hour where we could walk around to different tables with topics. Discuss, and even icebreaker it doesn't all have to be water.
I mean, it could be as simple as, like, in order to get your ticket for the raffle, you have to go to this table and that table. You got it.
That's a good idea. I'll pass that along to the. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any further manager comments for next month's meeting? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Second. Thank you. We will conclude October's meeting.
On that one.
I know.
Oh, what's going on?